today's video is finally going to be a necklace tutorial. I'm gonna break down step by step how to make a single strand necklace, which is the style of necklace I've been making since my business refresh, and I've been loving it so much. I feel like all the beads pressed together is super cute, and today's tutorial necklace is also inspired by Olivia Rodrigo. Her new album, You Seem Pretty Sad for a Girl So in Love, will have already came out by the time that this video is posted, but it's okay if you're not into Olivia Rodrigo either. You can also just watch this video for a necklace tutorial. She's just gonna be like our cute aesthetic inspiration for today. So let's get started. First, let's go to Pinterest for some aesthetic inspiration. I made this little mood board for kind of the vibes of the album. It's a lot of pink and blue and pastel and very lover girl vibes, but also mixed with Olivia Rodrigo's like rock star vibes as well. So also lots of stars and swirls and just very whimsical. I feel like every time I've said Olivia Rodrigo this video, I've like stumbled over my words. I don't know why her name is kind of like a tongue twister to me, but Olivia Rodrigo. Okay, now that we have our girly, pretty blue and pink aesthetic nailed down, I'm going to make a little bead soup. First, I'm picking out some blue and then some white and some pink beads. With all of them, I basically pick out 2 of each bead because I kind of try to balance out my necklaces. Even though they aren't perfectly symmetrical, I like to kind of include 2 of each bead, 1 on each side. Anyways, just to make it visually balanced. Our bead soup is all finished. I am so excited to use all these super pretty colors to make our necklace. I don't often use these colors together, pink and blue, but I feel like they're super summery, and I'm super excited to put this necklace together, so let's go. Now for the design. Like I said previously, I don't have perfectly symmetrical necklaces, but I try to kind of balance them out visually and balance out the colors. I've mentioned this before in previous tutorials, so just kind of the same sort of application of like balancing out the blues and pinks and white. However, even though it isn't perfectly symmetrical, I typically make the very like middle of the necklace kind of symmetrical, so like those middle like 6 or so beads with like 3 mirrored on each side of the necklace, and then the centerpiece in the middle of all of those. That's just personally how I've designed my single strand necklaces so far, but I've seen other artists who just have all asymmetrical all throughout, and I think that's super pretty too, and I do want to try that in the future, so that's completely optional. Okay, as of recording this voiceover, Olivia's new album has actually dropped now, and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about it in case any of you are fans. I personally love her upbeat, energetic, and more rock star songs over her ballads, so I really loved Drop Dead and Expectations and Stupid Song on this album. I feel like this album had a lot more ballads and slow songs, which totally makes sense because the title is literally like about being sad, so I understand that. And the ballads are also really pretty. The energetic upbeat songs are just my favorite. Comment below what you guys thought of the album. Okay, so back to the tutorial. Just a second ago, I pointed at the big shell beads and the big swirl beads because even though it's not perfectly symmetrical, those beads are big standouts because they're so large, and so I have 4 total, 2 on each side to kind of keep the necklace balanced. Additionally, I moved the big blue shell bead up a little bit just to like vary up the necklace and not make it as symmetrical on both sides. Now I'm trying to pick out a good centerpiece, so I'm just kind of going through a bunch of different bead options. And with this necklace, I ended up deciding that I didn't actually want a drop down centerpiece. I just kind of want a bead in the middle of all the other beads. So now I'm kind of trying different beads in the middle here. This will be my first single strand necklace without like a bead in the center that's dropped down, but I did always really want to try this as well. I tried a light pink round bead and also a glass swirl bead and a white flower bead as well. Now I'm kind of trying out the iridescent star bead in the middle. I do really love these star beads. They're literally one of my favorite beads, and I feel like they really convey that like pop star vibe. And I did actually end up picking this iridescent star bead as a centerpiece of the necklace. I repushed all the beads close together, which helps me kind of visualize exactly what the necklace will look like with all the beads pressed closely together. And then I grabbed a pink and a blue star bead as options for the end of my like chain, which you'll see that chain once we put the necklace all together. Okay, starting over on the left top side, we're going to set up the wire and set up that side of the necklace basically. First, I'm grabbing my new super thick and high quality jump rings, and I actually grabbed one too many. You don't need one on one side of the necklace. You only need one on the side that you're gonna attach the chain to basically. So you actually only need this on one side. I don't even know why I put it on the left side, but don't worry about that. Next, we are gonna put one of all of these on each side. First, we're going to put one crimp bead on each side, which are these tiny little beads beads. We're gonna use those to crimp the wire later. Next, we're going to grab one crimp cover for each side, which are the larger beads. They should be larger than your crimp beads. Sometimes they like to attach to each other, so that's like two that were stuck together. But they're basically open on the end, so they're like an open-ended, not completely closed bead that we're actually going to close around our crimp bead. And lastly are these kind of half crescent wire supporters. This isn't completely necessary, like you don't absolutely have to get these. I just like to use them to add a little bit extra strength to the wire, as these like corners of the necklace are where all of the tension is gonna be, so I like to add them. Next, you're gonna take your lobster clasp. I like to always test my lobster clasp before I put them on necklaces, just to make sure they're not a faulty one. So as you can see on that left side at the very top, we have our whole lineup and our lobster clasp. That's gonna be the side with the lobster clasp, and then our other side, our right side, is gonna be the side with the chain, and then we're gonna grab our wire. I just kind of eyeball with the wire. I literally just like hold it up to the necklace, and then I cut with extra space on each side. You're gonna want like an inch of extra wire on each side, maybe even a little bit more. It's better to have extra wire than not enough wire, so definitely just overshoot it if anything. Now we're gonna take that left hand side, and we're first gonna grab our tiny little crimp bead. We're going to slide that on, and then this is important. You do not want to like loop and like close the crimp bead until you have everything on that you need to have on. So we're also gonna add our little half crescent supporter, and then before we close the crimp bead, we're also going to put our lobster clasp in as well. So right now I'm wrestling with the wire, and I'm actually trying to push it through the other side of the half crescent. I know it's kind of hard to see, but I'm trying my absolute best to kind of show the camera. Right now, don't worry about the other half of the wire that's poking out, and don't worry about how long it is, and don't worry about the crimp bead. Just focus on threading the wire through that half crescent. Okay, I finally got it, so now we're gonna put on the lobster clasp before we close out the crimp bead or do anything else. Now that lobster clasp is threaded on. Now here's some extra footage with an in-depth demo of how to use the crimp bead and how to use the crimp tool. Please excuse the really harsh lighting, because I did take this last minute at night when I realized the original footage wasn't up to par for the tutorial. So for this demo, I've just threaded on a crimp bead onto a looped wire. Here's our crimp tool, which actually has two different aspects to it. First is gonna be this little half moon, and then over here is going to be this oval shape. I've straightened out the two ends of my wire so that they're ready to crimp. First, we're going to use that little half moon shape on our crimp tool, so that one in the very back, we're going to put our crimp bead into that, and once we press down, it basically crimps the two pieces of wire apart from each other and bends the metal super tightly around the wire. I'm just making sure that it's super pressed and super secure. And here you can see kind of what that looks like, the crimp bead after the first step. This isn't after the second step, this is just after the first, but you can see how it's flattened out and really pressed tight against both of the wires individually, and then flattened in between them. Now we're going to use the oval aspect of the crimp tool next, and we're going to use that to basically fold over the crimp bead. That is step 2, so we're actually going to fold it over itself. Basically, I put the crimp bead in vertically, and then we're going to fold both of the wires into each other, and then I kind of just mess with it and like flip it again and kind of like fold it again. But basically the goal is to make it kind of as round or consistent of a shape as possible. So this is now what the crimp bead looks like after step 2. So we used both the crescent and then we used the oval part of the crimp tool, so we're completely done crimping this crimp bead. Oh my gosh, I feel like I've said crimp so much, but anyway, now we're gonna grab the crimp cover and we're going to slide that over the crimp bead. That's what the open end of the crimp cover is for. It kind of goes over the crimp bead and it's hollow, and then we're gonna take our pliers and we're going to squish it basically so that it closes around the crimp bead, and this just makes a more full rounded bead for the crimp bead. It makes a larger stopper for the end of the necklace, and that's it. Thank you for joining me in demo mode. Okay, now back to my actual footage, and you're about to see how like this definitely wasn't enough to explain everything that I just said. Basically, we're going to do exactly what I just explained, and we're going to crimp that crimp bead. We're going to use both the half crescent and the oval end, and then we're going to put on our crimp cover. This particular time, I'm actually trying to expand or like open my crimp cover's opening more because it didn't have enough space. However, in the process of that, I actually like squished it, so it was really skinny and did not fit at all, so I had to redo that crimp cover. Ta-da! We have that crimp cover on. As you can see on our little half crescent piece that's kind of like supporting the wire, I have threaded through our lobster clasp. So that's the setup for one side of the necklace. Okay, now that we have that whole side set up, it's time to thread on our beads. And something to keep in mind with this is that the very first and the very last beads on your necklace are going to kind of have that extra wire threaded back through them, as you can see right here. So you want to make sure that these first few beads and the last few beads have large enough holes in them to kind of fit that extra wire threaded back through them. So these very first two beads have that extra little bit of wire that was hanging off wrapped back through them. And we just do this to keep the necklace secure. Now I'm going to go ahead and thread on all the other beads. This specific section right here that I'm pointing at, I feel like has too many sparkly, iridescent, like multifaceted beads, basically crystal shaped beads. So here's my technique for taking beads off of a necklace without making it super messy. As you can see, I just hold the very last bead in the row and then I just pull basically, and the wire pulls through them without like disrupting the beads order. That's just a really great thing to keep in mind if you ever want to backtrack and like change beads in a necklace once you've already threaded it. Another little note or tip that I want to make to you guys is just to keep in mind what direction you want your bead to face once you thread it onto the wire. With these single strand necklaces, of course, if you like thread the bead facing down on the wire on the left side, it'll be facing up on the left side, but if you thread it down on the right side, it'll be facing down on the right side, if that makes sense. So basically halfway through the necklace, you kind of have to switch which direction the beads are facing, like vertically, so that they'll face like upwards going up that side of the necklace, if that makes sense. Now I'm just kind of preemptively testing that I'm going to be able to thread the wire back through the last few beads of the necklace. So I'm just threading that wire through the last 3 beads to make sure that they can fit the wire basically before I go ahead and close out the necklace. And they're good, they fit the wire, those last 3 beads do, so we're good to go. I also decided really last minute that I wanted to change another thing about the necklace, which is I didn't like how these flower beads looked right next to these swirl beads, like pressed up against them. I don't know why. I often do this where I like tweak the design after the fact, but I want to feel like the necklace is perfect and I don't want to have any regrets about not adjusting small things like this, even if it's kind of inconvenient in the moment to adjust it. I always want to be happy with how the necklace turns out. So I'm using that same technique where I'm sliding the beads off by like holding the last bead and then just like pulling on the wire basically. Now that the design is completely done, I'm going to basically wrap the necklace around my neck and make sure that it fits and that it's a good size before I finish up the necklace. That's another tip that I have for you guys. As much as I think I can kind of gauge like roughly what a good size is, it's always a good idea to just like hold it up to your own neck and make sure that it's a good size before you finish it out. Now I have the same exact setup on the end here where I have a crimp bead and the half crescent wire guard. And now I'm just kind of eyeballing that extra wire and I'm going to cut it to the length of those 3 beads that I know it can like loop back through. So here I am snipping off that wire to that length and now I'm gonna thread it back through the crimp bead. This part is kind of hard, especially since I used a wire guard. You're kind of like fighting against the wire guard, but I did eventually get the wire to go through the crimp bead and the following 3 beads. With the other side, we wanted to make sure that lobster clasp was already attached before we closed the crimp bead, but with this one we can go ahead and close the crimp bead because what we're going to attach next is going to be a jump ring and then the extender chain, and of course the jump ring we can just open and hook on, and now I am hooking on that extender chain as well, closing out that jump ring. We want to make sure it's flush. We want to make sure it's flush and secure. Now you can hook that lobster clasp into that jump ring and ta-da, we have a finished necklace. Technically I like to be a little extra and I like to add a little bead on the end of the extender chain, so here I am deciding between blue and pink. I decided to go with pink and we're just going to put that on a little ball end wire. I'm just going to attach that to the extender chain for a little extra pizzazz. Ta-da! Our Olivia Rodrigo inspired aesthetic necklace is completely finished. I love how this one turned out and I'm so glad to finally give you guys a single strand necklace tutorial. Keep in mind that single strand necklaces are relatively new to me. They're the newest jewelry item in my arsenal, so if you've been doing these for longer or have any tips that I didn't mention, absolutely feel free to put those in the comments. A lot of the materials that I used today, including nylon coated wire, the crimp tool, and crimp beads, are all linked in my Amazon storefront if you guys need links to materials. If you want to keep in touch, my Instagram is @AussiesJewelry over on Instagram, and my jewelry shop is aussiesjewelry.bigcartel.com. Thank you so much for watching up until the end of the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed and you'd like more cozy small business content and more tutorials. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!